Tone. I'm the founder and CEO of Culture Intelligence, and this is a new global CultureCast. Our ambition is to talk with culture intelligent leaders and stakeholders in the world right now to increase insight in their culture leadership and how this can help others. So, today's focus is learning culture. It has been defined as the most business critical driver of all right now as we're facing increasingly new challenges. And to help out on this matter, we have gathered two of the masters out there. One veteran in the field, he's from Stanford Research Institute, and he's been involved in several edtechs and a lot of other things. So, welcome back, Eilif Trondsen.
Thank you.
In the other corner, a global businessman, serial founder in edtech field who has put both Attensi and Be Your Best to life and a lot of other startups and initiatives. Odd Skarheim, heartily welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And I will actually start with letting you introduce yourselves just shortly to say why learning culture and why you want to talk about this with me. You want to start, Odd?
Sure. No, I think it's a very important topic, and I find it super important when you want to succeed in any type of business and organization. I think it's the core of succeeding. So bringing in the right people and train them with the right things, improve them, and so they have personal goals and there's company goals, and they're working towards them and creating a massively strong corporate culture. I think it's super important and also super exciting.
So good. The question now is, how is learning correlated with performance? That's really the key question, because learning in itself isn't really great if it's not turned into something that is valuable in addition to that it's valuable for each and every one of us. So Eilif, what does research tell us about the correlation between learning and performance?
Well, first of all, I had to admit that most of the literature that I read is written by people from the learning industry and so on. So they are probably not the most critical analysts out there. But I think it is a great consensus about the effect of learning on performance. That's why organizations want to become learning organizations, because they know that that's what they need to do in order to improve. And all the companies that I have worked with over the years, I spent 40 years at SRI and at Strategic Business Insights, and in 3 different learning technology programs that I had, with very large organizations from Asia, from North America, from Europe. And they were committed to learning. And they, year after year, they were investing in learning, experimenting with learning technologies. So if it didn't have an impact, if it did not improve performance, I don't think they would spend the money that they were. And these were leading technology companies, Cisco's, right, IBM's, and so on of the world, and Amazon. Amazon even went as far as to hire a leading scholar from Stanford who came from Carnegie Mellon, Candace Tilley, whose focused research was on adaptive learning. So they hired this top-notch scholar to come into Amazon to work with them. And Amazon does a lot of training, and that's a word that Odd likes. And I think training, particularly in the workplace, that is of course critical importance, more so than learning more generally. Yeah. We're all learning people, but to learn to do something, to perform certain tasks, is important. So Amazon is one of the leaders in training and using technology.
Yeah,
and Candace is focused on adaptive learning.
All right. So that puts me to really focus back on not something as big as Amazon, but on Attensi. And for you, Odd, can we really learn to learn? Is that something that is possible, or what's our take on that?
Uh, that reminds me of one of the Attensi slogans, which is "Teach learning a lesson." So that's one of the Attensi slogans. And first, I would like just to comment what Eilif said about the correlation with the training and learning, and can you really learn to learn? And the reason why I started Attensi in the first place was the focus on creating impact and measure it. So how can you create workplace and business impact? And then through working and training, learning programs. And then how can you do that the best way to make sure that people actually do it and that the level is high? So it was in that order. So the essence was business impact and how do you move the different key performance indicators. So it's all about measuring what you want to move. So absolutely important for learning and training programs.
And this is just cue because this is what we do. We measure, but we measure not learning, we measure culture. And so my hypothesis is that if you increase your focus on learning culture, you will learn better and then you will perform better. So it makes sense. But do we know anything in your experience, Odd, with learning? Are you also able to measure the correlation between culture and learning?
We haven't done that so much, but it is of essence. So we haven't directly measured and looked at the correlation, but we have made several training programs where you train in the corporate culture. You
Mm.
get it's a simulation, gamified simulation from the workplace, and where you score the employees in the different values. So depending on what kind of behavior you have and the decisions that you make. So that could be one way of measuring that the corporate culture that you want to implement in an organization is understood and carried out in real life.
Yeah. That sounds really cool, and to correlate that with some of the number cranking that we have been up to. But let's put our focus back on the global arena. Do we know anything about leaders who really succeed with this? How are they recognized? What is sort of the key characteristics with that type of leader? Do any of you have any data on that?
I have not seen any data specifically on leaders and relating to connecting that back to the learning activities in companies. I think these, and most of my work has been in Silicon Valley, of course, and these tech leaders that are involved in these companies that are competing and doing well, they uh, they see learning in action and they see the importance of it, and so they're the ones that get invited to all the learning conferences and so on, talking about what they're doing.
Yeah.
They talk about how they're testing out different technologies and trying to be on the leading edge and supporting workers. So, but I have not seen specific studies that identify certain leaders and relating that back to learning culture.
That would be super cool to identify some of the, because I'm pretty sure that these leaders that have put learning on the agenda in a systematic way, like we're talking about, they have something in common.
Right.
So that would be interesting to identify, and then we could scale it and say, if you want to lead knowledge workers or leading cultures, here's what you have to focus on. So, um,
I think I think some of the commonalities among those people are their willingness to invest
yeah,
and experiment around
yeah.
coaching. around learning and around training. They're the ones that will are willing to give employees opportunities to test out different things, and who are the leaders in AI now,
Mm.
and trying to get the most output from the new AI technologies with Chat
Yeah.
GPT and so on.
Yeah, we'll be back.
So
Return to that in a second. But first of all, Odd, you must have felt this pretty strongly because you decided to start a company doing this. So tell me about was that really necessary?
Could you please repeat the question?
Was it really necessary to start a company to get this right?
To get the training right?
Yeah, to get the training, learning, and training in a systematic
I think
way.
there's several that can do this in different ways that work well. I think also like when you ask the question about research and in specific areas, it maybe won't work in take out a specific area because it's like sometimes you have to move so fast. You are as a leader, you need to test out what works, what sticks, and then move fast. So much faster than the research can work. So
right,
and then you have to change again because if
right,
the market environment changes around you or there's something internally that you makes it necessary to change, you have to change again. So it's about yeah, I usually say I probably stole it from someone else. It's about throwing the spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks, uh, and then and move on really quickly. So I think it was important to create a toolbox that the top management can use for different areas to train the organization and within the areas where you want the organization to focus and to improve. So yeah, that's an answer.
Yeah. And it's interesting because the next thing you founded, I think, was Be Your Best, which is another take at some of the same concept. Uh, or tell me
Yes,
how that
so
works.
that here it is same type of technology is gamified simulation. So using game technology to train real situations, and so this is for of all things in the world for football players, soccer players, but it's all about training the head of the players. So it's a cognitive training, and here, that answer came all the time because we used with VR glasses, and the question comes, but how do you know that this work? So here we know it works because here we did put research on. So we had research studies following this for a long period of time, and now we can prove that it actually improves performance on the field. So it is about training the head, how you gain information on the field, on the pitch, and how you make faster and better decisions. So yeah, so this study shows that the German national under 17 team improved 28% within a 9 week period.
That's cool numbers because they're trained by VR and then they applied it in games and
Yes.
fields.
So yeah. And we had a control group as well, and yeah. So we measured how they performed different cognitive metrics, and then through a game, and then they trained with it for 9 weeks, and then there was another game where we measured the same cognitive metrics
Mm,
and looked at the
mm.
improvement.
So, what is a cognitive metric? That sounds like
Yeah,
a
and
strange
it
word.
is,
Tell me about.
and
Yeah.
the more I tell about it, the probably the harder it is to understand. But this it
Okay, but
no, but
I need to understand that.
it is about looking around and what are you observing. So that's easy to understand. What are you observing? And on a football pitch, it's about where do you have your opponents and your teammates. So in front of you, it's easy to know, but in back of you, you don't know. And particularly when you're under pressure, and particularly right before you receive the ball, then your eyes are focused on the ball. What we train them to do is look away from the ball right before you receive it, so you know who's behind you at all times. So, and that makes you faster. You can make a decision before you receive the pass, and that's what the very best players in the world do. And those are processes in the brain, cognitive processes that they call executive functions. So it's something that they call response inhibition. It's different terms that they use within psychology, not just in sports.
Yeah, that is just super cool. And I so much wish I could. I'm going to read the report if I can get a hold of it, because this is super interesting. And I can't help thinking this must be a good training tool for leaders, not only in football, but leaders, executive leaders who take decisions, make things in their daily life. Has that been tried?
I'm sure there is leadership training, and it is based on role play. And I'm sure there's a lot of
Yeah.
consultants and people that do role play. So this is role play, but in a virtual world. So and on a football pitch, it's so fast because it's recreating a game. But it is effectively a role play where you can test out different ways of behavior and see how does that person respond on doing this or doing that. So at least so for manual type of training role play, I'm sure there's people out there doing it, and I haven't seen it specifically for what we're doing. But I totally agree. It is different. It's a great opportunity.
It must be, and I'm sure we could see some results of that. And t- Eilif, what do you think? Can we look at some of these experiences in a more global frame?
Well, let me just make a few comments. First of all, on Odd's technology and what he's doing with soccer. And soccer certainly is a very, very global game. It's incredibly competitive. The amount of money that is being spent now on players and so on is
Yeah.
absolutely amazing. So if you can improve performance just a little bit through some of these technologies, it could have a dramatic impact. And you know the importance of winning a game, and it's a matter of centimeters and being able to do the right things. I saw an article quite recently. It's called The Athletic, that took Ødegaard, Martin Ødegaard, and it showed his positions at different places when they were attacking, and saw how he positioned himself relative to other players and why he was so successful. So I think it was a perfect example of what Odd is explained in the importance of seeing where you are on the field and seeing where you should pass and how you should pass.
Mm.
You should send the ball to where the player is going to be.
Yeah.
And so you can learn that by practicing with the VR set, learning how to visualize the field. And I would imagine that the big consulting firms like McKinsey, for example, which is very big on using VR in a variety of settings, that they will be starting to use these technologies also in
Executive training.
role playing
Yeah.
for senior managers and so on. And so they can measure everything. Because if it's in a simulation, you can measure everything and see cause and effect.
Yeah. That.
And so that should be used internationally.
Yeah. And I think to put some sort of data on who they are and the values they represent would also be interesting to add that data set on it, because we would find out what kind of mindset do you need in order to play this game well, not only on a physical sense, but also how do you actually play the game. And I'm curious to see if that is also a correlation between high learning mindsets in one end, and then high performance in the field, and see if that correlates also, which I'm guessing it will be. Do we know anything about that, Odd? You have worked with Geir Jorde, a professor in football and psychology, was that anywhere near our discussion?
Absolutely, and what Be Your Best does is based on his studies. He's one of the leading researchers in the world within his area, high performance sports. He found a very clear correlation between what he calls scanning, the ability to gain information and improve performance. So that's kind of the red thread in his research throughout 20 years, and he has researched many of the best players in the world. So
Mm.
that's one of his main areas of study.
That's great. And so, if you were to guess, what kind of values do you guys think that the best players out there have in the football field right now? What do you think is what would be fine if we map them?
And when you mean,
What kind of values, yeah, personal values that they actually have inside them in order to be that
I
good?
think you will find very different from player to player, very different. But I think one thing that's a difference from today and before is that if you look at the very best players in the world, like Haaland, for instance, and others, they are super focused on um, the importance of improving themselves, even though they're on top of the world, even though they're the best in the world. The only thought they have in their mind is how can I improve. So they think about it every minute of the day. So and their whole life is wrapped around how can I improve. So it means they're literally a 24-hour player. It's all about sleeping. They don't go out. It's what they drink, eat, rest, and and the rest of the time is how can I improve. So I think that mindset was very different 20, 30 years ago, particularly in English football. It was also about going out to the pub. So these guys don't go very much out to
Yeah.
the public bar.
Yeah, it's not their life. And does that go, is that a contrast or a challenge to their team orientation? That strong individual improvement focus?
I think it's a good question. It is absolutely the role of the coach or the manager. It is the greatest coaches are very good at this, and maybe that's what makes them great. Is because they bring in these top class players, and they're making them work very good together, and it is super hard. So it is, yeah, it's a
Mm.
good question. I think it's super hard, and many don't do this well because it is super hard.
Yeah, and if you have a
Mm.
team of prima donnas, it's going to be very hard to have them dance together. So there is. I'm really curious to find out more how they balance the two. What do you think, Eilif?
Well, I think um, we are going to have a very interesting future as portable devices get used more and more, and players are collecting data on themselves
Mm.
all the time, and everything is becoming more metrics, and they analyze those metrics to see how they affect their performance on the field. And I have read that some players are collecting metrics on themselves and sending that in with their, when they apply to play for other teams. They say, "Here's my data. Here's my metrics. You know, this is how much I work out. This is how I eat. This is what I am as a person. You can see I'm really dedicated to being in physical shape." But can you also measure how you collaborate with other players?
Yeah,
That becomes trickier, and because soccer and even in business, it's a team sport.
yeah,
So how can you measure the chemistry in the team? And
yeah.
and I think there's some interesting things, and one can collect data on that too, and then see to how well is this
Yeah,
working? Is the chemistry right? If they're not playing well, what went wrong on that day?
exactly.
What did not function very
Yeah.
well? So
And this is our field.
it
This is what we put data on. We put data on personal values, and in a sum that becomes a culture. So we can actually understand some of the things that goes on between person to person or person in team or some of that. But back to what you said, players are carrying around metrics about themselves. Why isn't that done in leadership?
that's a good question.
Yeah, I
Odd,
think
oh,
it's a
Or
good question, and it's also and if we relate this to sports, there is a lot of data collecting going on. Huge amount of data is being collected, but it's all within the areas of physical strength,
yeah,
speed, all those things that I would say it's easy to measure. So, but it is important. So they do gather this data, but they do it's very little done in other areas with, like you say, culture, or with
yeah,
psychology, other areas which is important for improvement. So I think it is harder to collect that data, and
yeah,
the knowledge is much lower. So but I totally
yeah,
agree, and I think one thing that these best performing teams in the world, I know football and soccer well, but I'm sure this is the case in other sports as well. Is the coach, when they bring in players, they also think about different roles in the team. So maybe they sometimes have players on the team that are not the best, but they contribute to the culture. I don't even know if
yeah,
the coach and the manager knows this, but they just know that this person brings calm into the dressing room. This
mm,
person is a smart person,
mm,
so he brings smartness
mm,
in. He's maybe not the best player, but he brings smartness into the dressing room. So I think they would
yeah.
know that they bring in different roles into the team, and as a team as a whole, they perform very well.
Yeah. And this is so fascinating because, like you said, it's all based on gut feeling. So some people are really sensory intelligent when it comes to this. But what if we could put data on this and say, like you said, the VR training that you do with Attens or with the Be the Best, you have data on the cognitive metrics. So let's put that out as a certificate. Here's my cognitive metrics. I want to add on to my physical metrics, and here's my application. Now, that type of process can be done in leadership as well. And I don't understand why we're not able to put more metrics in addition to the CV, which is, so yesterday in so many ways. So, where are all these new and really accurate metrics when it comes to leadership?
well, first of all, leaders would have to accept and embrace that, and that becomes, would be could be very revealing whether
Yeah.
you're effective or not, and are all leaders equally willing to open themselves up to that, to show what drives them, and are they really effective
Well, football players
in
do it. Football players are willing to do it. They're better paid, but it shouldn't be a difference. So this is what I find interesting.
I think also it's about what you measure, if it's if it's objective or subjective, because you have the testing that you do when you hire people, or you have a team development practices, the typical big five tests that you use. That's kind of not carved in stone. This is how you are. It's dependent on many things. You have more IQ type of tests, and so there is some data going on out there being used, but I think people also understand now that data is not carved in stone. It is something that you can use, to ask questions. It's not telling who you really are. It's what the test tells that you are now. But I think it's dependent on bringing in data that are being used in a wise way. So it actually
Yeah.
improves your organization or in your processes.
Uh, that is so fascinating. And so if you look at this, so data are available, but they're just not applied in the fields. You're very early in that wave, I think. So if we look at what does the world really need right now when it comes to new metrics and learning? How can we understand the next right step?
If you ask me, I'm.
Yes.
You didn't ask me, but I'm answering. No, it's
Yes.
yeah. I will of course talk about this from my point of view. I'm sure there's several different other views, but I think it's it is possible to measure the effectiveness of learning, and we have done it for a long time in Attensi. It is the core, and uh, just from the very beginning when you onboard people, just getting the onboarding right is super. Just there you can measure that onboarding to bring them up to a certain level, understanding the corporate culture, understanding your task and understanding the organization and the work tasks. If it takes 1 or 2 weeks, so there you have one metric. If you can do it on half of the time, you save 1 week. So that's one way of measuring it, and then you have several different other areas of. It could be customer service, it could be sales, and it could be other types of things. I think many things are.
Yeah.
It's possible, but it is not. It's not simple. It is. It's a lot of work. So
Yeah.
it's about finding ways that make, because if you have to spend a lot of time on bringing it in, it might not be worth it. But because as long as you see the results coming, but if you find ways of doing it in a smart way, it's absolutely something I'm sure that we will move towards.
Yeah. And it's already been proven in the field of football. So it's like the pilot maybe has been done, but can technology and now I'm really into AI and all the new tech that we're talking about. Can that help the processes, or how will that affect our discussion?
I think that Candace Tilley going to Amazon was very telling, and I think I would love to have some insight into what specifically she's doing at that company and what technologies she's using to improve what I call adaptive learning, which is providing the learner the type of materials, the type of challenges that the learner needs that is specific to him or her at the given time, so that the things that you are trying to achieve are not too high up, that it becomes very frustrating when you cannot reach your goals. The goals are set according to where you are, what you already know, and that's taken into account in the system. So the system knows that,
Mm.
and when it interacts with you, it will take that into account, and therefore the whole learning experience, and particularly when you do this on a technology platform, and the technology can easily take that into account. That's why I'm very optimistic long term in terms of AR and VR and artificial intelligence, because you can apply so many things into the platform that is being used that they can help make the situation very right for a particular learner at a particular time, depending on what the learner is trying to do and so on.
Yeah.
And I am pretty sure that this is what Candace Tilley is working on and putting into effect at Amazon, because they're very keen on moving people out of the warehouse and into different types of jobs in the company.
Mm.
and training them internally for these different positions. These are people without even an academic degree. They hire people out of high schools
Mm.
and giving them the opportunity to learn inside the company and learn by doing.
Yeah.
And this is something that I think is going to be more and more important in the future.
So, what is really the future of learning? The way, if we're going to sum some of this up, what do you think, God? What will we see in not too far future?
Well,
Yeah,
one of the things that you'll see then is that you don't need just college education and
yeah,
college degrees. It will open up learning opportunities for everyone.
yeah. And for learning companies, Odd, what do you think? What's the future here?
I do believe that with the AI, there will be. We're already seeing a big change, and that is it is you can produce and develop much faster using these tools. So just the developers, they just can work faster using this. So that's already happening today. That will happen in many different areas of developing learning technology. And on the other side, I'm sure there will be a flood of companies coming out into the market with learning tools with AI, uh, telling you that you can develop a training program out of a document that you have in your drawer. So, and it will be possible. The question is how well is that quality? So I'm sure there will be a lot of companies developing training and learning which is not of high quality, but it looks nice because
Mm.
everyone can make something that looks nice on the screen, but learning is not what's on the screen, it's what happens within you and what would you do in real life afterwards. So that will time will show.
This is scary because it's if I'm not a very intelligent buyer, I may be tricked by some low quality provider versus a high quality. How can I tell the difference? What should I look for?
I'm again, this is from my point of view. I'm sure there's other points of view, but I've seen
Yeah.
this for 25 years that there's all the time coming companies into the market and people, oh, this looks nice. And I see that the companies are buying things that they don't really know what it is and it doesn't work. And I can tell them at once, it will not work, but I can't tell them that. And then after 2, 3 years, then they come back and say it didn't work. So now we need to get something that really works. So it's
That really
yeah.
works.
So it's being a professional buyer.
Yeah.
I think it's super important
Mm,
and really understanding what you're buying.
mm.
And I think the best way of doing that is it is hard to understand everything that's going on. So it's I think the best way it's and that's not it's not rocket science, but it's piloting, trying out,
It's
piloting,
not, yeah,
try
it's
for a
not
short
rocket
period of time and
science.
see how is this, and
Yeah.
maybe try different things. So,
Yeah.
but I think that's the way of doing it.
Yeah. All right.
I think there will be lots of personal tutor technologies coming up. We're already seeing that. So you will have an assistant or a personal tutor that will help you. And we need organizations to test all of these things out, to weed the quality ones out from all the other things that are not so good,
Mm.
and it makes the job much harder for people who buy these types of tools and platforms,
Yeah.
because they're going to be, as Odd says, the market is going to be flooded with these types of things,
And
and you need to be a smart
mm,
buyer.
that will be a challenge. So to sum it up, then, and I'm really fascinated by our discussion on the football compared to the leadership. I think this is a super interesting comparison and field. So if you were to give one advice to leaders out there, what could they learn from football?
You're asking me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I usually say it's the other way around. So what can
Yeah.
football learn
I
from
know.
the corporate life, the people that does this really well? But I think one thing that they have done well, but I think that's also the same in the corporate sector. It is building a high performance culture where everything is super clear what you're going to achieve. And then they break it back into different steps and see, okay, what does it take from each person in this team and each support person. So the culture building, I think, is great within, most football clubs and most sports clubs. They're building a strong culture. So I think that's something that is possible to learn from. And the other is the step which is now named sports science, all the way of gathering data and how they use this to make decisions on who they're hiring, for instance, and scouting, how they're scouting new talent. So they're using a lot of data also on pretty young people as well, within their own system, and measuring how they're doing. So hopefully they will also start doing this not only on the physical, technical, and tactical side, but also on the psychological side and the cultural side.
Yes, yes. Odd, I'm going to play this on repeat all day long from my sender. This is right up our alley. It's so interesting that you say that, and I think if we were to put that out there and really have leaders engage in it, well, I'm sure we could see a lot of better mix and learning between the two, and I think that would be a really rich field of insights that we could create. How about you? How about you, Eilif?
Yeah, I think that at least based on what I have read and seen, leading soccer teams around the world are very, very data and getting more and more data driven and focus on um, using the data they have and collecting more data, and how they use that for team performance could show businesses on what they should be
Yeah.
doing. And I agree with Odd in terms of acquisition, for teams to find the right players. It's the same in business, to find the best employees. Now is critical for business success. So how do you find the right people that will align with the corporate culture and what the company is trying to achieve, and using the data both from inside the company and from these potential employees, matching
Mm,
that in the acquisition process. I think that there's a lot that business executives could learn from what is happening in the soccer
mm,
teams, the leading soccer teams, and a lot of technology is coming out.
mm.
I know there are quite a few soccer analytics companies out there already, and more are coming.
Yeah.
And I think they would be smart for business executives to look carefully at this and what they could learn from it.
So, if any of you have a team that would be willing to map their culture, let me know, because then we could match that with performance data and cognitive data from Attensi, and then we would have a ball of data and metrics that we could analyze and understand. How great would that be? So that would be our shared challenge for the next year or so, until we speak again. But just thank you so very much for being with me on this super interesting discussion. I love the part about matching and combining two sectors and understanding more. I think that's the innovation for the future, combining silos. I think that's really where innovation sits. So thank you so much, and really good luck in the rest of what you're doing in your specific fields. And I would really invite you back in some time to see what more can we learn in this field. So thank
Thank
you,
you.
Very good. Thank
thank
you.
you. Have a great day. Have a great day in Silicon Valley, I live, and you will be where you are, Odd, and we'll talk again.
Bye.